All right, so I'm here with Brendan Prost, director of Spaces and Reservations, which is on its cross-country tour, and we're going to have a little chat about the movie today. So thank you so much for coming in and talking with us, Brendan.
Well, thank you so much for having us on. You know, like it's hard to garner exposure for a little film like this, so we really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, Spaces and Reservations is on a cross-country tour. Tell me about the process involved with making that happen.
Well, the tour came about, and we kind of realized that a lot of the conventional exhibition and distribution, avenues for feature films weren't really going to be accessible to us because of how small the film is, in terms of how much we made it for and how much kind of personal resources we have to do stuff with it, and because of the length and the content of the movie. I mean, it's a lengthy movie, but mostly it's very low concept. It's very performance intensive, character driven. Not exactly it's not plot driven. So it's not super friendly to film festivals, or it's certainly not to sales agents and distributors and things like that. So we decided we needed to come up with a different way to share the movie, and this was a really exciting thing for me because I've done small scale self-programming on for my other two projects, but nothing in multiple cities. And this just seemed like a really exciting way to engage directly with people who are going to see the movie and to meet people in a bunch of different cities. And it was both we needed to come up with something different, but at the same time, it's just really fun and really exciting way to share a movie.
And how has the response been so far?
The response in Vancouver has been really very positive, and we've had great turnouts for all three of the screenings we had there. It's I won't lie, it's very challenging in a media marketplace like Vancouver to get attention for a little movie like that, especially in an industry city. It's really a city that's driven by big American television shows, and people are mostly involved and caught up in that, and even the feature films and the local stuff that's in town, it's of a certain scale that we weren't really part of. So I think creating some legitimacy for yourself in that environment was tough for us, and it was tough to get beyond the immediate audience of friends and family and friends of friends and that sort of thing, which is, I think, probably fine for where I'm at in my career.
So yeah, like you were saying, this is your third full-length indie feature. How do you think you've grown as a filmmaker through your different projects?
I think the best answer to that question is this is my first feature film that I made after the benefit of film school education. I made Generation Y and Choch in a extremely DIY fashion, making it mostly with my friends who are interested and enthusiastic about making movies, but who didn't necessarily have production experience. Going to Simon Fraser University out in Vancouver, getting the benefits of being on set a lot, and basically learning the craft and learning the technical skills that make you a better artist and make you more expressive and more communicative. And the other great advantage of Spaces and Reservations was working with a bunch of committed and trained actors. I've worked with my friends and friends who are interested in acting, and they always do fantastic work, and they're always very passionate, and you can't replace that sort of passion and closeness that you have with your friends. But having actors who are trained and are invested in and committed to making themselves vulnerable is a really, really exciting thing.
Yeah, you've said that the movie was inspired by two relationships that you've had in your own life. With such kind of personal subject matter, how was the process of making this film for you personally? Was it difficult, or did you find it cathartic at all?
It was a very challenging experience, but I obviously embarked upon it because I felt like it was something that I really needed to do. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I was having a hard time reconciling my memory of these two experiences that I had. Not necessarily the relationships as a whole, but separate experiences within two relationships, and how those relationships were different and similar in many ways. And I was just having a very hard time moving past that. So, reflecting back on those experiences and trying to make sense of them through the writing process, and then talking through them with the actors, just sculpted a certain understanding that I had, or that I didn't have before, and got me closer to being okay with these experiences, and mostly just having them make sense in my mind. I mean, there were moments on set where, like, I would see things that I had only ever imagined in my mind to be true, and it was a very, it's so rare, like, when you're in a relationship, I mean, you experience it kind of on your own. You have to imagine what it's like for the other person. Like, I made this film, I got the opportunity to, like, tell the story of, like, this other person that I was in a relationship with, and it's a very sad and a really rewarding thing. But sorry, I've kind of gotten off track because I'm just, like, reminiscing. But does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does, absolutely. So one of the things that stood out for me most of the film was the dialogue. How difficult was it for you to capture those kind of awkward, tense moments that happen between two people that have been in a relationship for a long time?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. There's a particular like kind of communication that you see in the film in the early half where Jamie and Casey's relationship is suffering this malaise and this disconnect, because on the surface it needs to kind of it always looks and feels like, okay, well, everything seems fine. I mean, we're still talking. It's not like there's these dead, like, Bergman-esque, like, silences. I mean, they're still talking and you're still passing words back and forward, but the things that you want to say and what you want to express to the other person are not embedded in those words. And I think, like, coming up with a way in which they would speak to each other that was, it was there, but there was nothing to it. It was just a matter of, like, doing a lot of, like, scene study with the actors and talking, entirely about the subtext. Spaces and Reservations is a movie that really, like, the beginning half of it is very, like, non-explicit. It's all stuff that kind of lives in subtext. And then the latter half of the film, everything kind of bubbles to the surface and they finally start articulating it and talking about it. So, it was just about asking the actors to, like, internalize all that subtext and all that work. And then just, like, then when they're talking about the nothing, when they're talking about junk, it's easy for them to express and for us to see as the audience, like, what they're actually referring to or what they're actually trying to speak to.
So the press release says that there was no rehearsal prior to shooting. How do you think this affected the final film?
I think I don't like to do rehearsal because one of the things I find most exciting about cinema is like the potential for vibrancy and volatility and spontaneity that is just, it's just so thrilling when you're watching something happening for the first time on camera and capturing it to be able to share it with other people. And most often when you're, when I find you're working with, with actors who aren't super experienced and you're not super experienced as a filmmaker, you really only get to those really incredible emotional moments once during the course of, like, shooting doing the shot and doing multiple takes. And you don't want to get to it in a rehearsal and then lose it because it's so hard to get back to it. I prefer to get really, really close, start working it on the day, and eventually, around like a third or a fourth take, you just capture something that's just so, it just comes out of the actor and they haven't thought about it, they haven't deliberated it. It's not a pre-planned thing. It's happening in the moment because they're just there. They've ceased to be acting and they're just living the emotional experience of that moment. And I think everyone's got to do their own thing and do it differently. But that's I can't do it with a rehearsal. It's just you got to be in the moment and really living that.
Yeah, and the chemistry between Jamie and Casey, I thought was incredible. Like, I believed them every step along the way that they were this couple. Did the actors, Zach and Taylor, playing these characters, did they know one another before embarking on this project?
Not at all. They, came to know each other during the pre-production period. Living in separate cities, actually. Zach was living here in Calgary and Taylor is a Vancouver actor. And they would just communicate via Skype, and we would have, like, kind of conferences. The three of us would get together on the internet and would talk about it. And then there was a point where they managed to meet up before the movie started, and Taylor came to Calgary and spent some time here. But they didn't know each other, and I just, like, I chalked that up to just, like, these two people so eager to be vulnerable and so eager to make this project work. One of the things I was thinking about when I was watching the film in Vancouver was that as a filmmaker, just been seriously like outclassed by my actors, because, you know, there are times in the movie where I think the narrative isn't as strong, or they're filmmaking things that I think, you know, these are deficiencies, but the actors always believe it. I'm so flattered by you're mentioning that, because I think there's not a moment in the movie that they're not there, and they're not completely in belief of the circumstances that are going on and what the other character is doing, even when it seems, you know, more fantastic or strange or not understandable to me as like an audience member, perhaps. They always believe it. Yeah. And that makes the scene so real. Yeah.
So, yeah, we were mentioning earlier, the film comes in at 140 minutes, but you only shot it in 16 days. That's a huge film to shoot in such a small amount of time. What was that process like?
It was the most intense experience of my entire life, like emotionally and physically. Because we shot 15 days in a period of 16. We had a day off for the actors and the other filmmakers, in which I was doing prep for the rest of the run. And they were like, they'd be 10, 12-hour days, and I would have an hour on either side of the day at least to prep and to wrap. And it was just completely exhausting in every way possible. But at the same time, like, that intensity, just like the results that you get from that are just so extraordinary, because you only spend time thinking about the work and only time on the movie. Like, your mind strays to nothing else. You're only spending time with the text and what you're shooting and looking at the image and working with the actors and talking about them, talking about it extensively. But, you know, there's a real reason why films aren't made in that span of time, and movies of that length aren't made in that span of time. I don't think you could do it with a production that was a lot bigger too. Like, you know, I think it's for you could do it with a movie that's made for $5,000. You know, my friend made a movie for $50,000 last summer, and he shot 12 days. And you know, like, you couldn't do a $50,000 movie for 16 days. You would just, you know, you'd kill people, and you have to shoot it differently. You have to conceptualize it differently. You know, I think you make a movie that fits within, you know, the resources and the assets you have at the moment. And, you know, I had X amount of time that I thought I could get out of the people I was working with, and I was like, okay, we're gonna, you know, stretch that for all it's worth. And so I imagined a movie that was going to be achievable in those 15, 16 days.
Were you surprised at the length when you came to the end of shooting, or did you kind of write it with a running time in mind?
No, I didn't. I like you know, the thing about making a movie completely independently, you know, like when the money for the movie is coming from your own pocket, and what you do with the movie eventually is up to you. I mean, the running time is just like, it's just an incidental thing, you know. It's just something that happens as a result of all the work that you're doing. So I certainly like kept an eye on it, not during the shooting period, but in the editing period, and after I watched, you know, the footage at the end of the shoot, and realized that it was going to be a longer film. You know, I think, and that's largely because of the freedom that the actors had to set the pace for the scene, and getting to the, you know, the critical points in the movie was, in a scene, was entirely up to them. But you know, when I was editing and when we were shooting, like, it's always just, you're just making choices as to what gets you the closest to, you know, what you were trying to do, to like the you know, what you were trying to express, the you know, the truth that you had in mind. And so, like, it's always just running time. It's just something that happens, like, in my mind. And, you know, I'm proud to have made something that's patient and observative, and is so focused on giving these characters enough time to live and to breathe. Because most of the time I watch movies and I don't get an opportunity to really get to know characters. And I feel like, you know, if you have to stray towards one way or another, stray towards giving them more time. Don't stray towards giving them less. Like, I don't subscribe to this attitude about movies, especially in film school, that every moment needs to be utilitarian. Like, it has to be about doing something, advancing the plot and things like that. I think there's really something to be said about spending time watching people live their lives. And, you know, this is all partially, you know, an attempt to rationalize the long run time, but, you know, and I definitely do acknowledge that, you know, if I was a filmmaker with the experience of 10 years, I probably could do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in a shorter amount of time. I think, but you do the best you can with the knowledge and the skills you have at the moment. And I think the most important thing is that it's really truthful to what I wanted. Mm-hmm. I see a film in there that could be shorter, but it's not the film that I wanted to make. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm very passionate about this rundown.
No, I can see that. And I agree that, the pacing is excellent. And, despite the long run time, I never felt bogged down by it. Like, I felt that the time that you took to explore those emotions kind of really gave it a depth of emotional honesty that wouldn't have happened had you, focused on making it 90 minutes long or something like that. But yeah, that's all the questions that I have for you, Brendan. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners?
No, not really. Just, that if they're interested in the project, it's little movies like this, they really need people's engagement to become successful and to become, meaningful in any kind of broader sense. So if it sounds like a cool project, I would really ask them that they engage with us and get in touch with us. And we have all the social media fun stuff, and we have screenings obviously here in Calgary and then in Winnipeg and Toronto and in Victoria. And there's more that we could do with the movie after that, but we have to know that people are interested in it. So It requires people to go, yeah, that sounds cool. And so I would love to hear you say, yeah, that sounds cool.
I think it sounds cool.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank you, Brendan, for taking the time again to come and speak with us. Once again, this is Brendan Prost, director of Spaces and Reservations. Check it out in theaters and online. It's a great project, and I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks so much.